You know the feeling or the experience of practicing one day and then the next day you get up and then you become worse, or you've lost the skills you built yesterday, so you have to do it all over again, and then the same thing happens next day? This is quite natural because that's how the brain and the body learns. And basically what your brain is trying to do once you have, been practicing a lot, is trying to get rid of the skills, right? It's trying to say, okay, I got all this mess in my short-term memory. Let's clear the short-term memory, whether it be muscular or, real memory of whatever scale shapes, right? It tries to clear it out so there's room for more the next day, right? And then the next day you come along again and you fill it up with the same stuff, right? That's hey, right? But now it remembers some of it, right? So it's not as hard to remember it the next day. And then it tries to clear the space out again, your short-term memory, and it keeps doing that. That's why you become, you're not as good the next day as you was before. But then at some point the brain says, hey, this takes up too much energy. We can't freaking load the short-term memory every single day. So let's store all this in the long-term memory. Let's put it down in the basement so that when this dude or dudette is playing this stuff again, we don't have to learn it again, which takes enormous amount of resources. So let's save resources, and saving resources is all the brain is about. That's how it survives, right? That's how it builds fat on the body if you eat too much, right? So you can survive the winter. Pretty cool. And it never gives more resources to the organs in the body than it has to. So it's always, it's thinking in economy all the time, right? So that's how it learns. And you just keep hammering away at the same thing. And then eventually the brain gives up and says, okay, this is too much resources spent on relearning this every day. So let's put it in the long-term memory. That's what learning is. But once you then think you have learned it, then the next thing that happens is that, a month goes by or 2 months goes by, and then, hey, I'm not as good as I used to be, right? And that's because the brain is trying to get it out of the long-term memory again, right? Because, we might leave space for something else down there. And so it never ends, but it does end if you use the following strategy. First of all, recognize that this is how it is so you don't get too frustrated, right? But secondly, you need to follow the same process as tuning a piano. If you got an old piano in your living room and you call the tuner up, right? And he comes to the door, you can't tune it yourself. Then he takes it all apart, tunes it perfectly. Voila, right? And then he goes away, and then you start playing the piano. Next day, it's out of tune again. Why? He just tuned it. You just paid $1,000 or whatever, or $200 to have it tuned, and now it's out of tune again. Well, because next week he comes back and retunes it. Why? Because they've been sitting in that untuned way for so long that it's, it wants to go back to its original state. So he has to come and retune it next week. Okay, then you play it along, right? Then 4 weeks goes by and it's out of tune again, right? Just slightly. And then he has to come back and retune it. And then the next month, and then every third month, and then every year, right? That's what we know as conditioning, because you need to condition that piano to stay in tune. And that's exactly how the brain works again. So whenever you learn something, I always do this. First, I have this explosion, right? Because I discover something I can learn. And then I start practicing it. I practice it all day and all night, and I practice it all week and all month. And then I kind of lose a little bit of interest in it, right? And then I start practicing something else, but then I return to it. And I do that methodically because I know I have to. I return to it, and I have a little bit of a practice session every week. I revisit it. And then after a month, I still revisit it. And after 2 months, I revisit it, and I start practicing it again. And I do that over and over again until I don't have to practice it anymore. Now it's like riding a bike. 10 years can go by and I can pick up my guitar and I can play that same thing perfectly. That's where we want to get to. But you have to follow the same procedure as when you're tuning a piano. Ask any piano tuner, that's what they do, right? And when you're practicing something, you are also a conditioned piano. Because that's why it's hard to learn something new, because your body doesn't want to do it. It wants to do the old thing, right? That's why when we practice alternate picking for like a year or half a year, then we then try to do something else than alternate picking, hammer-ons and pull-offs. It's like we have to unlearn all the repetitions we did with alternate picking. So it becomes harder to learn something when you're very good at something else, because you have to, the body's so habitual and it's so used to these patterns. So Yeah. So we have to install new habits in the body, micro habits. That's what learning is. So, and I really want to hear about your own experience with this process here. You might look back and say, hey, that's why whatever, right? That's what my brain did when I discovered this little methodology here. So leave a comment, like and subscribe, share this video, and then I sincerely hope to see you in one of the other videos popping up on the screen or in the next video here on YouTube.